Welcome, everyone, to the L7C podcast. Today, we have a very special episode for you guys. Today, we're going to be talking about the NCAA tournament from the women's side and the debacle that happened. We're finally going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Megan Rapinoe versus Draymond Green. We're going to talk about the WNBA and soccer starting. We're about to hit a whole bunch of things. So we have to have our queen of the L7C, and now she has a new title in her first podcast with her new title, Dr. Chelsea Police. How are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm good. It's nice to hear that title after 3 crazy years, but finally done. Finally get to use that title, and it feels pretty good.
And I know everyone from the L7C side was super excited seeing all your social media posts that you did it. So from them to you, obviously, congratulations, Doc.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So with that being said, in your first podcast as a doctor, the world did not disappoint while you were working your way to that dissertation, and it was giving you stories galore. And let's just go back all the way to March during NCAA March Madness. Obviously, it was remote, and the men and the women had their separate locations. And a 37-second video by Oregon forward Sedona Prince shocked the world. She was showing the gym. It had a single stack of yoga mats, free weight, and then compared to the men's where it was like a full-on gym. And then they also had the comparisons of the goodie bags of like the men's bag had a whole bunch of stuff and the women's bag did not. And just that video and that picture set things ablaze. And before we go deeper into that, because I remember you were the first one who shared it with me, what did you think about all of that?
Yeah, so actually, one of Stanford's athletic trainers actually kind of blew the whistle on this first. She posted a picture and was like, what's up with this, comparing the weight rooms and the significant difference between the men's and women's tournaments. And, it's really unfortunate, but honestly not that surprising. And the crazy thing is the way the NCAA kind of reacted to this was that they wouldn't have done anything had there not been so much backlash. And it's clear to me that the NCAA just doesn't care about women's sports, or that's really how it felt in all of this. And, part of all of this, and we'll probably talk about this more in detail, but is with the manuals, and that the women's tournament wasn't supposed to have a designated weight room until the Sweet 16. And to me, that says that not only did the NCAA fail the women, but the administrators, the athletic directors, anybody who said that was okay from the onset and agreed to that to me is a problem when we're seeing that the men's teams had, ample space, ample equipment, whatever it was that they needed in order to, be successful in the tournament. And some people have said, well, not having the equipment until the Sweet 16 was probably because there were going to be fewer teams. The NCAA said there was a space issue, but we clearly saw based on Sedona Prince's video that space was definitely not an issue. There was plenty of space to have, a weight room and to make the most of it. And I think it's important to kind of mention the manual and how the weight room wasn't going to be built until the Sweet 16 and how teams adapted to that and said we brought our own stuff to be able to do our own workouts and had to adapt. And that's just kind of the reality. But to me, it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't have to be a situation where the women's teams have to make these adaptations or bring their own equipment. Like, it should just be something that's part of being in the tournament. Like, these are Division I athletes, and whether they're Division I, Division II, Division III, whatever it is, they have worked incredibly hard to get to whatever championship tournament, whether it's basketball, soccer, whatever it is. And they should have access to whatever it is they need as being part of that championship. And the opportunities for women and men should be exactly the same. There shouldn't be any significant difference. And, there have been some issues since March Madness, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later. and just discrepancies. And so it's really disappointing, but again, not super surprising.
So initially, the NCAA, they tried to hide behind like it was an environment control thing. I also did mention too that the food was different too. The men's food, I mean, it looked like pretty good food, and then the women's food looked like food you would get from in middle school. That was a huge thing. Oh, you're fine. So then they changed the food thing, and then with the gift bag, duffel bag thing, I forgot if it was the vice president who said that there was different stuff in the bags, but they both equated in the same like money value, which looking at the pictures over here, I don't see how that would equate to the same money value. And then obviously, like when you said when Stanford blew the whistle and then it was posted, Twitter or Snapchat or whichever social media thing. But we've talked about this a little bit. You had the initial outcry, like, oh, this is terrible from like, and then blah, blah, blah. And then you had the hide behind, then you had the apologies, then they changed the stuff. And then that was almost it. Like that part was like, all right, we're closed on the chapter with that. And then when I was just researching this in general, like I couldn't understand one, Mark Emmert, the president of the NCAA, who, I mean, he just got a raise too. Like if you're in charge of this, you would think that in the day of social media, you couldn't get away with this type of stuff, but I don't know, you get what you pay for. And I've always wondered with Title IX why it hasn't done anything in regards to this. And when I was trying to get my U on, trying to be a doctor and researching and studying, I saw that like 20 years ago, the NCAA had a court trial. It was like the NCAA versus Smith. And like the Supreme Court back then unanimously held that the NCAA is not required to abide by Title IX rules because of its non-profit composing members, blah, blah, blah. So don't know how many people know that. I'm pretty sure you know that, but I just found that wild that case has not been revisited 20 years later by the Supreme Court, especially where there's some different people. And I know the NCAA has their own Title IX policy, but it's not the Title IX policy, and obviously it sucks right now. So do you think that court case can ever get revisited and then looked at like, hey, maybe we need to change up this Title IX, like that court case from 20 years ago?
Before I get into all of that, I do think it's important to kind of talk about the swag bags a little bit more. And the thing that I think was a little bit more appalling than just the discrepancy in what they received is that the women's tournament, nothing on it said March Madness, nothing said anything related to the tournament. All it said was women's basketball with like the NCAA logo. Meanwhile, the men's tournament has a whole Final Four logo, and the women have one too, but it was not on anything that they were given. Mm-hmm. And even on the court during the tournament, that Final Four logo or that tournament logo was not on the courts. It was not anywhere other than maybe brought up like prior to a broadcast. Like, and to me, that I think is more problematic than just, what they got. I think, it should be equitable across the board. And I definitely agree that there's no way that monetarily they were anywhere similar. But I think for me, that was the biggest issue that I had with the swag bag difference was that just the logos and that the NCAA refuses to use March Madness for the women's tournament when in fact it's still March Madness, whether it's the men's or women's tournament. And again, this is something that we've talked about in the past, like men's sports should not be the default. And so if you say March Madness, you should 100% say men's or women's because they're both, or whether you're talking about basketball or any sort of sport, you should identify whether you're talking about women's or men's basketball or a men's or women's sport. And that's really the big thing that I found problematic with all of that. But in terms of Title IX, so yes, this is going to be something that I don't know if the NCAA will ever be held to Title IX. I think the biggest issue is that they're technically not bound by Title IX because they are not an educational program. So while they're member institutions, have to follow Title IX or be compliant with Title IX in some degree. The NCAA does not, because the big thing is they do not receive federal funding. So the institutions that are members of the NCAA do receive federal funding, but the NCAA itself does not. And so it's going to be very difficult to overcome or overturn that particular Supreme Court case, whether it even reaches the Supreme Court or not. And I think, right now, the big thing that the NCAA is dealing with is this idea of name, image, likeness and what that is going to do. And a lot of people say that that's absolutely going to obliterate Title IX and that women are going to be at a disadvantage. But in reality, I think it actually would be beneficial to women that they're able to build their brands, make some money off of their, name, image, likeness. But what is going to be important for institutions is to make sure that any education or programming that they have in order to help athletes build their brand and build, their monetary endorsements, whatever it is, that is equitable for both men's and women's sports. That's where Title IX is really going to play a significant role. And so Title IX is a very complicated, statute and how it is applied and how it is followed by institutions and who is bound by Title IX. And unfortunately, the NCAA is not. But it'll be interesting to see if those athletes then maybe look to, not sue or bring a lawsuit essentially to their institutions for not being compliant with Title IX. That's where I think that this could be a problem for institutions, not necessarily the NCAA, but that the member institutions agreed to these discrepancies and that it was allowed to be this way if enough students were like, hold up, this is not equitable, this is not fair, this is not being followed, or this is not compliant with Title IX, then I think that could be a potential problem for individual institutions, even though in reality, you could put the blame on the NCAA, but the NCAA is going to be like, sorry, we don't have federal funding, you guys do, so you guys are the scapegoats in this instance.
Yeah, because when it's come to name, image, and likeness, they basically are telling Congress and everyone else to fix their thing about it. And I do agree with your point about name, image, and likeness actually helping women's sports, because I know the one I wanted to bring up, I had to make sure I got her last name. I only know her first name. Paige Buchers. Well, I'm going to just call her Paige Buckets. The freshman player from UConn who was player of the year. And when name, image, and likeness comes, she can capitalize on her Instagram, because she has about 813,000 followers on Instagram. So that alone, if over there, if Chevy or whoever the hell it is wants to get her on, so she could promote that and then put her her own personal tag of, hey, make sure you check out the UConn game, we're playing Stanford, or anything like that. I feel like that would definitely help women in general in the sports of college. Is just then it'll come to the next study will be how many women are getting asked to do these promotional things over the men. Because I know most of the time when you talk about name, image, and likeness, it's only been generalized to men's college football and men's basketball. And then all the other sports are SOL, or they don't bring in money. And the only reason I picked Paige as the example is because she goes to a prominent basketball school that is well known by any casual basketball fan, and she's really good. One freshman, so.
And truth be told, a lot of people have done research into name, image, likeness, looking at it based on sport, gender, etc. And particularly during March Madness, they were looking at athletes at different Division I schools, and more than 50% of the top athletes were in fact women. And Paige was one of them. Haley Van Lith from Louisville has 600,000 or 700,000 followers on Instagram. The Ncaa is allowing their athletes to make money off their NIL now, and Chloe Mitchell became famous on TikTok for doing DIY videos and now, earns money off of her name, image, likeness. She's a volleyball player. She's one of the first to monetize her brand. And so there are opportunities for women. And in fact, I just did a research project on this looking at women's college soccer players, and there is 100% an opportunity for them. But, the NCAA wants to continue to stronghold the athletes and not have to give up their, revenues. And as much as I understand this idea of earning revenues, there's a better way to do it. And it shouldn't be off the backs of college athletes. And, the thing that I find funny is, college athletes, even Division III athletes, if you're a college athlete, like, people recognize that and respect that. And these athletes can't even go home and put on like a clinic in their hometown. They can't do private lessons and earn money. Like, there's nothing that can be tied to their name, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens come July 1st, when some of these NIL state laws come into effect and what the NCAA does, because I know they're trying to get a federal law passed that basically supersedes all these state legislations that have been passed, and hoping that Congress or whoever will side with the NCAA and keep things amateurism, and maintain this idea of being students first and that they shouldn't earn anything off their name, image, likeness. But in reality, like, I don't understand what the issue is. Maybe schools put in stipulations about what they can and can't endorse, because I understand that there are some things in terms of making sure that they're not products that would look bad on the university. I get that. But at the same time, like, how much free advertising do these institutions get by snapping a picture of an athlete, using it on their social media, and they get nothing from it? So, myself thinks that they should have the ability to earn off their NIL, but what that's going to look like is going to be very interesting in the next couple of months.
Yeah, agreed. I think with that too, with keeping the game amateur, even if they're getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, a normal college person can go to college and work. Obviously they don't, depending on the student, they don't get some of the benefits as a college athlete, like a free scholarship. And you ask some normal people, they would trade not working for a free scholarship any day. But I think with the college athlete, the school's not even paying them. It would be someone else paying them. So, and I can get the not doing it for certain brands, just thinking of like Ohio State, their shoes and stuff are from like LeBron. So I don't think they would want their players like promoting Reebok or Adidas, like stuff like that. So if you have stipulations on some you can't do, that's cool. But I think it's going to be coming down the line. But you brought up revenue, and revenue was one of Draymond Green's main takes that he had. I know you're not the biggest fan of Draymond, but Draymond and Megan Rapinoe and others, but it was mostly media has it as Draymond versus Megan, had a little tit for tat on their views on increasing the brand of women's sports. Do you want to touch light on that?
Yeah, Draymond, I have a hard time with this because I think he was coming from a good place, so to speak, but he was talking to the wrong people. Like, he was trying to blame the women for not, pushing back or not finding a way to increase revenues or do more or get themselves paid, when in reality, that's all they've been doing for the last 2 decades or however long this has, been ongoing. So I think he needs to be talking to somebody different. And, Megan Rapinoe and some others tried to, Sue Bird tried to tell him that his comments were misplaced or directed at the wrong people. And he just kind of doubled down. And I'll be honest, I don't listen to a lot of what Green says because most of it I just don't care to listen to, because he tends to not talk about things in an inappropriate manner, or, doesn't have a lot to back him up when he says that type of thing. So I think it's misguided to blame the women and not calling on other men to help in this process, or to look at themselves and be like, what are we doing to maintain these issues? And particularly with the WNBA, like the NBA, kind of owns part of the WNBA. And so they certainly could do more to help this issue. And, the NBA players, some of them have stepped up and tried to help promote and do some things. And the thing that people tend to say is that the WNBA players want NBA money, which many of them have come out and said, that's not what we want. We just want to be able to play basketball and earn a living wage and not have to go play overseas because we don't make enough in the WNBA. Like, we're professional basketball players. This should be our one priority, but we have to play year round because we don't make enough. And, I think that's really the issue here. And Draymond Green just, while I, again, think it was well-intentioned, I don't think it hit the mark. And I think he would rather just talk than take a second and listen to what these women were saying, just simply because, people provided comments and were trying to engage with him in this conversation. And again, he just doubled down on what he's saying, blaming the women, saying that they're not fighting for, increased revenues. They're not bringing people in. And I'll be honest, I feel like they've done the best that they could without having the support of other individuals to help make it possible.
Yeah, the whole premise of this thing is that revenue is always down. You can't argue with lack of revenue unless you make revenue go up. So if you make the revenue go up, then people can get paid more. He was just saying from the basic principles of every business. And he did talk about how the NBA always wasn't a global game, like and they weren't driving as much revenue as they were. But as someone who's likes the NBA as much as I do, it's true. The NBA wasn't that global of a game, I think, until 1984, where a young man from North Carolina got drafted and his name was Michael Jordan. So I'm not going to say like there's one individual women's basketball player or soccer player or anyone who's Michael Jordan, but I'm going to say that the stars that have come through all of the women's sport equal the fact that they can be a global thing if you let them be a global thing. If you put the money, I know we've talked about this 100 times, into the advertising, into the TV deals. I really do believe most people don't realize that the TV deals is where a lot of these sports make most of the money. So I would like to see what the WNBA's TV deal is, or like the women's soccer team's TV deal, because I feel like they really need to renegotiate that to get some more money. And then Draymond, like you said, he doubled down on his thing. He said that him and Megan and all the other people, because he only tagged women in his initial thing. Like he tagged Candace Parker, Rapinoe, Degrassi, like all of them. Degrassi, I said Degrassi. But he tagged all of them, but he didn't tag any like guys in there. But then he also had the lines like, well, this is for the people who say they stand up for women, and for them to stand up. And I was like, but you tagged all women. So, I mean, nothing gets done if it's just one gender. It has to be both. And he didn't tag any guys. And then people came at him like he was wrong on it.
Also, like thinking about the NBA has been around for a while. The WNBA, this is their 25th season. And again, something that's had more time to develop and earn revenue and grow is certainly going to be more successful than something that is not nearly as old. And I think sometimes people want to compare the NBA and the WNBA as if they've been around the same amount of time, and they haven't. And suddenly people are starting to realize maybe we should be investing in women's sports. And so it's this idea that the NBA is on third base and the WNBA is starting at home plate. So yeah, certainly the NBA is going to look more successful because they've had a head start. And I struggle with people who talk about how nobody watches the WNBA or, says nobody cares about women's sports, when in reality, there are a lot of people out there that care about the WNBA or women's sports in general, but just haven't been given the opportunity to see and experience and have the same kind of fandom that we see with these, big four professional sports that have had the time and ability to grow. And I also think a very interesting case is, the MLS. So people talk about how the WNBA and women's sports are constantly losing money. They don't earn any revenue, but nobody talks about the MLS. And me, I'm a big soccer fan, but the MLS loses money every year, but nobody talks about, getting rid of the MLS and nobody is like, oh, we're not going to watch, or we don't care about the MLS because they're a non-revenue generating sport. That's not true. So why are we having this conversation with the WNBA when something similar is happening in a men's sport? And I'm sure you can guess why that reason is. And so that's not a fair argument anymore, because there are men's sports that don't make revenue, but are still continuing to be watched and understood. It's all about, these networks and these high profile people taking a chance on women's sports. And Alex Ovechkin actually just invested in the Washington Spirit in the NWSL. And there have been a significant number of celebrities and athletes that have started to invest in NWSL, which is huge. So, it's about buying in and it's about seeing the opportunity, but not bailing when something doesn't go right from the get-go, because it's going to take some time. And we've seen with these record viewership numbers that if you advertise, if you let people know that these games are on, that people are going to watch them. In fact, the NWSL Challenge Cup final was on CBS. So anybody who had, an antenna or cable was able to watch it. And I saw a specific tweet that was like, I had no idea this game was on. I'm not a big fan of soccer, but I turned the TV on and there it was, and I watched it. And it's as simple as that. And so people need to understand that you need to give women an opportunity to be on those channels and not be behind some kind of a paywall. And that's how they're going to be successful. And there was a comparison of the Challenge Cup versus, like EPL soccer. And, while EPL had viewership numbers that were almost double, still there was a significant viewership for that game when people say that nobody wants to watch women's sports. And, I know we're going to talk about this, and, the WNBA season starts today. And I can't tell you the number of people who have been like, watch. And you can watch every single WNBA game for $16.99 if you get the WNBA League Pass. You can watch every game. I know some of them are going to be national or televised nationally, but it's about making sure people know that. And I've seen so many people on Twitter like, hey, I'm giving away a WNBA League Pass. Why do you want it? Why should we give it to you? And I think that's really great and a way to promote the league. And again, they now have a relationship with Google. And I think that's awesome. So people are there and people want to invest, but we've got to find a way to get people that are at home watching and understanding what these women are doing. And I still need to watch the 144 documentary that premiered last night. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but I've heard that it's really good. And it's all about the process that the WNBA went through in terms of preparing for the bubble and racial injustice and all of that stuff. So it was all over Twitter last night. So I really need to watch it. But if you haven't watch it for sure. But yeah, I think it's all about opportunity, and people are like, well, nobody cares. Well, nobody cares about something they don't know they care about. So you got to give people opportunity to find out they care about it.
Yeah, agreed. And with the WNBA being 25 now, and obviously NBA started way before the WNBA, I would just say now with it being in its 25th year, obviously the people at the head of the NBA, Silver, all of them, they know it works. They know how to market. So that's the only thing that, even though WNBA is younger, I'm like, well, you already know the tools how to market to make something successful. Send some, do it for the same for the women. And I know you talked about this a couple months ago about the draft being on Twitch and for the soccer. And I felt like that was a really cool thing to do. And I feel like if other platforms, like if the TVs aren't giving these girls these contracts and you need to go to the Twitch route, you need to go to Amazon Prime route. I mean, Amazon is freaking live streaming Thursday night NFL games. And typically, if you watch NFL, Thursdays are usually the weakest night, except for like the season opener. So I think you need to start going there. I mean, obviously, YouTube live streaming games. Like, there's so many ways to live stream stuff that just to get people's attention. Because after that Twitch thing, I'm like, more people should do that. It's a free platform and you can do that. So I think that's what they should do going forward. But main premise, I agree. Draymond stuff, I think he was trying to come to the right place. He even said, we want the same thing, but he was not aiming the blame at the right people. He was aiming at the players who were trying to do it. And it's more the execs and the TV brands. And he should know better since he's such an open player empowerment person on that regard.
Yeah, and I give Stephen A. Smith a lot of credit for, calling him out. I've said this before. I don't usually agree with a lot of things that Stephen A. Smith says, but that video you shared with me and him talking about how Draymond Green was wrong and that his intent was good, but who he was aiming this at was incorrect, and even called himself out for not doing more to help promote women's sports, and that the men and the executives who are in positions of power need to do more, need to hire women, need to invest in women, need to, give them the opportunity. And I think that was really huge for him. Now, I hope that he goes forward and acts on that and doesn't just talk about it, because talk is cheap. But I do give him a lot of credit for being on air and saying something about it. And basically telling Draymond Green why he was wrong in that particular instance, because I think to some degree that does take a lot of, just guts to do that in that situation. But, again, whether or not he really goes out and does something to fix it is something remains to be seen, I suppose.
No, and that video was good. My only pushback on that is obviously that was on his show. He's gonna get a plug for me. Stephen A's World. I think it's like on ESPN Plus, but not everyone has ESPN Plus. To me, it would have made a bigger deal if they would have had that as a discussion topic on First Take, which is the number one sports talking thing in the morning and in the country and in the world, 10 a.m. to 12. So if that would have been like the first topic leading into First Take, that would have got a lot more eyes, because if I didn't follow Stephen A. Smith on Twitter, I never would have saw that video.
Yeah, for sure.
Going forward with the talk is cheap thing, if they're really about it, there should be more women subjects on those shows, on a First Take, on an Undisputed, on a Colin Cowherd. Like, if you watch them, you barely get anything. The only time they ever get mentioned is obviously that we talked about, like the Go controversy, because Serena was involved, or soccer is barely mentioned on ESPN because they really don't have like a partnership with them like that. And mostly women get talked about, maybe the MMA, but that's when Dana White comes on. So it's like, I would like to see more women talking point segment on the shows, and not just the travesties like the lock general like stuff. You can cut back a little bit on the LeBron talk every once in a while and insert a word.
Yeah, Candace Parker has been amazing doing like NBA pregame, postgame. I don't know exactly what it is, but I haven't watched her specifically, but I see videos later and some of the things that she's done and the conversations that she's had, and kind of calling Shaq out on his shit when he says some things. And it sounds like people are extremely receptive to her being on that show, and I think that's excellent. And I think she deserves it, and more women deserve it as an opportunity to be in that sphere. But just wanted to shout her out because she's done some pretty great things in that kind of post-game, pre-game, show and kind of doing it for the first time and not just being, the host or whatever, actually playing a significant role. And people have, again, seem to really like her being in that role and have felt that she's done a really, really good job.
Agreed. She's done well. I mean, ironically, she was one of the people that Draymond tagged in his tweet, and he's been a phenomenal player and is very accomplished. So that is really good on there. But yeah, talk shows, get some more women topics in there. That'd be great. Besides when it's a national uproar. So other thing, switching back to college, another tournament, the women's golf regional in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, got canceled. At first, when I saw it got canceled, I was like, oh, something went wrong. So I saw the video, the rep, Brad Hurlbutt, walked down the stairs and just told the people that the girls, the golf course was playable, but not championship level playable because of the rain and standing water on the course. I'm not the biggest golf aficionado, but I saw the pictures and don't know how they were not playable. And then all these girls, especially seniors, who didn't even get a chance, some of their seasons just ended like that. What did you think of that?
Yeah, so I'm on the same wavelength as you in terms of not knowing a whole lot about golf and conditions and what's playable and not playable. But similar to you, I saw some pictures the next day after this story broke, and I was like, there is no water on these greens at all. I don't see any standing water. And even the person who took the photos was like, yeah, there's no standing water here. This is ridiculous. And I saw some other people who were like, we played a championship, an NCAA championship in worse conditions than this. I don't understand why this happened. And again, just some backlash and somebody was like, well, why couldn't they have, postponed, found another golf course, or even just use that course a weekend later for them to be able to play? Because again, like you said, some of the women, missed out on an opportunity, didn't get a chance to even, advance as a team or individually. They just took the top 6 seeded teams to advance onto the national championship, which is not how it should be. And again, somebody I saw a tweet was like, you have to wonder if this is how this would have been handled had this been the men's tournament. Yeah. And I 100% believe that that's not how it would have been handled. They would have found a solution. They would have figured out a way to make it work, to get this tournament played, this regional played, because that's what they deserve. And for whatever reason, the NCAA just has garbage takes about women and just simply don't care about, them and what happens to them. And so I was just really disappointed, but again, not surprised that something like this would happen. And, it's, some people are like, well, why are you doing this? What if? You don't know how they would have handled it with the men, but the NCAA has shown what they would have done, or the past speaks for itself. And so it's really difficult not to play that what if game, and really difficult not to be like, yeah, if this was a men's sport, they would have figured it out. They would have come up with a solution, or they would have postponed, or, something to make sure that it could get played. And, as somebody pointed out, there's a week in between the regional and the championship. So they could have used that extra weekend, or, most schools are done now. So it wasn't like, students had to be back for class. And if they did, that's part of being a student athlete. You have to figure out how to make it work, and they would have. And I would hope that professors would have been, more than willing to accommodate. I know not every single one always is, but, it's part of being a student athlete. And for the NCAA just to make this decision without, trying to come up with a solution that works for everybody is really, really unfortunate.
I really just want to know what playable, but was not championship level playable means. That's really, and like you said, Mr. Brad did not explain what that meant. So you could play on it, but it's not championship playable, which made no sense. And it was abruptly too, they were about to just walk down. It's like, hey, we're canceling. if you knew you were going to cancel, I was like, don't they check the field like before the players get there, or like from yesterday? Like, you just did it abruptly. Like, I didn't like how that was handled. Also, I didn't like the explanation because that makes no sense that you can play on it, but it's not championship playable.
Well, also, I don't know how many rounds they play for a regional. And so could they have just, decreased the round by one, like only played 36 instead of 72. I again don't know how many they typically play for a regional, but could they have done that rather than, canceling altogether? Or could they have done something so that, these teams and these individuals would have had an opportunity to, prove themselves beyond just being in the top six or being the top however many athletes in the field. And that's the thing about, championship time. You never know what's going to happen. And so, the top six teams maybe might not have advanced. And so to not even give anybody that are, 7 and below an opportunity just is really, really unfortunate.
Yeah. And you also said besides women's golf, there's been some issues in women's volleyball as well. So we've gone from women's basketball, women's golf, now women's volleyball. And I know this one kind of flew a little bit under the radar. So what's going on with what happened with the women's volleyball?
Yeah, so basically the NCCA said that there would not be announcers for the opening round games. And in fact, there may not have even been streams for the first couple of rounds. I don't know specifically whatever happened, but there was a significant backlash and there were announcers that were like, we're willing to do this for free. And they said it was because that there wasn't, resources were lacking because they were doing this all in one place, which to me would be the opposite of having a lack of resources because you're all in one place, but that's a different issue. But coaches even said we'd volunteer to commentate some games just so they would have the ability to be seen and people watching would have the ability to understand what's going on if they're not avid volleyball fans, and that it's unfair to these women who have made the tournament, have been through one of the most difficult years, and suddenly the NCAA is just like, nah, we don't care. We're just going to, have you play. Nobody's going to be able to watch. And I think in a situation, had they be able to participate at full capacity, I think maybe that would have been more of a justification. But because capacities were limited, players' families weren't able to travel, that was the only way that they were going to be able to see their daughters play. And so for the NCAA to just be like, we don't have the resources, like, you're $1 billion industry. You should 100% be able to find a way. And so suddenly, after much social media backlash, they suddenly were like, good news, we're going to stream all of these games and have commentators and, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, why would you not just do this from the beginning? Like, you had to know that people were going to be upset about this. And you, as an organization, PR is super important. So how can you not anticipate these things? And so whoever is doing PR for the NCAA probably needs to find a new job, to be completely honest, because PR for them has not been great and their decision making hasn't been great. And I, truth be told, don't know how Emmert still has a job.
He just got a contract extension.
I don't know how that happened. And people were like, what? When that announcement was made, got a raise, whatever. But again, it's men get rewarded for doing things and sometimes doing things not well, but that's just the reality. And it's unfortunate. And yeah, I just think it's a mess, and it's a huge dark spot for the NCAA that they're going to need to figure out, because sooner or later, they're not going to be able to do these little Band-Aid fixes. People are going to kind of start to, I don't want to say riot, but like somebody somewhere is going to do something that's going to be detrimental to the NCAA at some point. Or someone's going to create their own organization that's going to compete with the NCAA. If Power 5 conferences finally decide, hey, we're not over this. They're not treating athletes fairly. We're going to create our own, governing body. That's going to be a huge issue for the NCAA. And if Power 5 conferences do that, you better believe that smaller institutions are going to go with them. So the NCAA's got to figure out their shit, for lack of a better term.
So, a couple things. I did also see that there was some issue with changing, they were changing on the practice course, but then the NCAA said that they're secure places to change. So I didn't want to leave that out.
Yeah, I do remember that.
So going back to the announcing thing. So 25%, whatever, gone, and they had no announcer to do play-by-play. For my experience of college sports, and my brother played college sports at a very high level, they typically have the local announced team follows the team wherever the hell they go. And then if it's a bigger game, they have the local people one place of both teams, and they have whoever the hell is in the middle. So even from a business standpoint, I would understand okay, if you don't have your ESPN people, let's just have the local people's voices be broadcast through the game. And shoot, you could even make more money off that. Hey, your Purdue local broadcast, if you want to just watch it from the Purdue side, here's the link there. Illinois volleyball side, you want to hear your Illinois announcer team that you've been listening to all year, go through there. And if you want to hear the mixture of both, just watch on the TV or whatever. I don't understand why they didn't ask that. That's one thing. The other thing is, honestly, I'm kind of getting sick and tired of social media backlash being the only reason things change, and not from a sports, not even just because of sports. It's because going forward, honestly, social media backlash is just bullying. It's the new form of bullying, and it's showing younger children and all that. That, to be honest, right now, if you bully people, it works. That's the only way. If no one said anything about this on social media, nothing would have happened. So I'm kind of getting sick and tired of that look, and just use common sense. And I agree, the PR person for the NCAA, or I feel like it's more PR team, they probably have a whole organization, needs to get looked at and reevaluated, get some more people with common sense. And then in terms of Power 5 or whatever, I know you've said that, and I know there's some people who have joked about it, and obviously you had that thing over there with European soccer where they tried to make their soup league, and then they were then someone was like, vamos, I'm out, I'm not doing this. But it is definitely, I don't think it would get to that point yet, because then if the Power 5 did something like that, then you have to pick who's in charge. And then that's a whole other issue in itself, because obviously the different regions would want their person in charge. And that's just a lot of work. But maybe they can threaten it. But I don't think we're at that point. I think we're at the point where, as more players, player empowerment on, they just won't play. And if the players don't want to play, that means you're not getting TV revenue. Then the TV people, who I feel are the real people in charge of all the sports, they're going to get mad at the institutions, and they're like, you guys need to figure this out, or you're going to lose our TV contract, and that's millions and millions of dollars their way. So I think that would be the next step before Power 5 succeeds from the NCAA.
It just will be tough, because it would have to be those men's, revenue generating sport athletes that would have to make that decision to boycott. And I think for some, athletes, they'd be like, all right, whatever, we can boycott. But for others,
no,
I don't think that's something that they would be willing to do, just because of maybe personal situations, or just having worked so hard to get to that point. They don't want to, jeopardize all that they've worked for. And I mean, I get that to a degree, but you would like to think that the women are going to get support from somebody. And right now, I'm not sure who that's going to be, but I hope. And I know some of the, men's basketball players during the tournament, like Jalen Suggs, basically came to the women's defense about the tournament, and they tried to set up a meeting with Emmer and get the women involved, and Emmer didn't want to meet with, both the men and the women, which is a whole different issue. But, it's somebody's going to have to do something to help make a difference. And it's not just going to be one person, but collectively a group of people are going to have to do something if the NCAA is going to really start taking women's sports, seriously. And that could be simply putting somebody else in that role, or, finding somebody else to be in certain leadership roles. But right now it's not working, and this is going to continue to be a problem unless some significant changes are made. But I don't know, I'm not super optimistic that those changes are going to come anytime soon, which is unfortunate, but again, a reality.
Yeah, and it's good that the Jalen and they were trying to do something and Emmert wouldn't listen to them. But I mean, I'm just going to be cutthroat and honest. Rich, powerful people only listen to rich, powerful people. That's it. I mean, if we're just going to, that's not even just from the NCAA, that's just the world in general. A rich person can say something to a rich person that a poor person told a rich person. Same words, but it came from a rich person, so it means more. Just like, who is going to talk to Mark Emmert? Like, who is it going to be? Like, and you hate to put more stuff on other people who are already doing their stuff. Like, me personally, I think the most powerful woman athlete on planet Earth right now is Serena, but she's doing her own stuff and she's already fighting the good fight for women's sports. So it's like, she can't just come to basketball and be like, do this, that. So I think we need other people to speak out about that stuff. And then even if we're talking about in the basketball world, the most powerful basketball athlete right now who's playing is LeBron James. And he fights the social justice fight just as hard as anyone. So it's just like seeing other people do it, and collectively, like if there's a coalition of rich, important people who wanted change, that would get more press than 18 21-year-olds. And sometimes talk about bullying, that's what you need, the press and all of that. And then speaking of the basketball, I know we already talked about WNBA actually starts today, 25th season. I saw the orange hoodies that they got. Those look pretty nice. Hopefully they are around in fall, winter time, because I would like to get one, but there's no point in me getting one in the summertime. So, but I would like to get one of those. But we also have the NWSL that is starting tomorrow.
That is correct.
And I am looking at their games for tomorrow, and I already kind of like what I'm seeing in terms of the branching out. You have one game that's on CBS Sports Network. You have one game that's on Paramount Plus. So that's a new streaming service, Paramount Plus, for those who didn't know. And then you got the game on Twitch. And just like looking through their schedule, like there's a way to watch all the games I'm seeing from the national level. So you can watch them on Twitch, Paramount Plus, or CBS Sports Network. So really good on them. I really like that. I feel like they're taking the right steps to branch out. If like TV's not going to have it, you could put it as a perk for Paramount Plus. Like, hey, we stream the top of the top women's soccer in the world. Make sure you check it out.
Yeah, tomorrow could be a full day of women's sports, because I'm pretty sure the WNBA has 2 games tomorrow starting at 1, and then they have another one at 3. So you could watch 2 WNBA games from 1 to 5 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock you can start watching the NWSL until the end of the day. So you could have a full-fledged day of women's sports. But yeah, the NWSL, I think, is a good example of finding ways to get their sport on TV or on some kind of a service, because they started with Twitch. Actually, they streamed some games on Twitch. They did the draft on Twitch, and then with the Challenge Cup last year, CBS All Access, now Paramount Plus, got the rights to that and continue to have the rights. And I think that's huge. And the only kind of downside is with like CBS Sports Network, your Paramount Plus subscription doesn't get you access to that. So you have to have a cable subscription in order to get CBS Sports Network, which is unfortunate. But for the most part, they're doing the best that they can. And in fact, they just announced that MasterCard is going to be a new sponsor, which is really cool. Budweiser is the sponsor for the NWSL. And, to go back to the NCAA, I think if sponsors started to, sound the alarm or say something about the inequities, that might get the NCAA to listen, that rather than, the athletes themselves. So if, Coca-Cola said, unless this gets fixed, we're done. We're not. Or, CBS said, if you don't get this fixed, we're going to, our television rights, whatever, we're going to decrease them, or we're not going to renew after God knows the 10-year contract or whatever ridiculous amount of time it is. Something like that would, I think, make the NCAA listen before any of their athletes came out and said something. But again, it's a catch-22, and those sponsors know, how much leverage they have and how many eyes see, during March Madness or during any NCAA sport. So it's tough, but again, it's going to take somebody stepping up and making that decision. But yeah, super excited for the WNBA and WSL to kick off their regular season. The NWSL, we did have the Challenge Cup a couple of weeks ago, which again was a lot of fun to watch. I went to Racing Louisville's first Challenge Cup game. Great experience, a lot of fun in the stadium. It rained, unfortunately, but it was great. Hoping to get back to the stadium sometime in the near future, but a lot of really great talent on that team. Got to see some big hitters. We saw them play the Orlando Prides. We got to see, Ashlyn Harris, Allie Krieger, Marta, just some massive names in women's soccer, which was really, really great. Atmosphere is awesome. So if you're nearby Louisville, would really encourage you to go to a racing game, because it was a lot of fun. But yeah, super excited. Have been following them pretty closely since I'm in Louisville, obviously. But yeah, just really excited to see kind of a full slate of women's sports, and knowing that that's kind of the schedule moving forward, and getting to experience that is really, really cool. And, I've seen on Twitter people like just saying, I get this feeling that in the next couple of weeks, women's sports are just going to explode, because there has been so much talk and interest around them, recently. And maybe I'm in a little bit of a, bubble, so to speak, based on who I follow. But overall, like things that I've seen, people are really, really interested in either, the WNBA, the NWSL, or even both. And I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. And I really hope that ratings reflect that interest. And I was just going to say, for the people who do have cable for the CBS Sports Network, and if you also have a phone, laptop, computer, for the technologically challenged people, you can watch the game on TV, and you could get the Twitch app, you can get the Paramount Plus app, watch on your iPad or your Samsung tablet, or watch on your computer. So you can watch both if you have cable TV and a working smart device. So watch both and support on that. And Chelsea, that is actually all we have for today. Is there anything else you would like to say before we sign off today?
One thing I did see is the Atlanta Dream just announced that they're going to have an all women and all women of color, in fact, commentary team, which is really, really cool. And I only recognize one of the names, and it's escaping me right now, but they're going to have 2 analysts and 2 color commentators that are going to make up their broadcast team, which is really, really awesome. And we've talked a lot about the Atlanta Dream over the last several months.
They're our team on the L7C podcast.
Yeah, so some cool news coming out of Atlanta, and some really cool things that they're doing. So keep an eye on that. And again, just a record-breaking historical thing, which it's sad that we have to celebrate those things, but it's super groundbreaking, and hopefully other teams start to take notice and do some similar things. And even, not just in the WNBA, but in other professional sports, men's and women's, where we see women having more of those opportunities. Because again, as I've mentioned, opportunity is really the key here in giving women, the chances to be in those spaces as their male counterparts are as well.
Before we go into our closing thing, I do have one other thing that popped up because we talked about this a long time ago. So I have the CBS Sports app on my iPad because that's where we do our March Madness bracket pools. And I saw the update today talking about the women's soccer that is starting tomorrow and how now they are on like the ticker and tracker. So if that's your preferred sports app, you can actually follow the scores now. Don't know if that's because they have a deal with CBS Sports Network now, probably, but money talks. And I know we talked about it ages ago, how you can go on the ESPN app and you can not get a lot of the women's sports tickers on your like score sheet. And so CBS, from what I saw, is one of the first to have it. So
yeah, that's exciting. I saw somebody complaining, or I guess complaining is not the right word, but pointing out that when you go into the ESPN app, you can see, like college baseball and kind of gearing up for the World Series. But softball right now is doing the same thing. And, somebody's like, I can't even access the bracket or, scores or anything on ESPN. So yeah, I think that's a great step for women's soccer, but certainly still some work to do and making those things accessible. Because again, how do you know if you like something or not if you can't access it or you can't experience it? And so, you're doing a disservice to those athletes and those people who enjoy that sport and can't, find out what's going on, who's playing, when, and on what networks. So yeah, definitely good that, and I think that obviously being on CBS does make a big difference. People would probably, question why there isn't, coverage on the NWSL, given that they're on CBS networks. But, piece by piece, little by little, we'll make some progress. And I think that's a definite right step in the correct direction for sure.
Agreed. Now, with that being said, now we can go into our signature closing. So I will let the doctor go first.
I don't know that I have much to say. I'm just excited to be back. It feels like it's been a while since I've been on.
International Women's Day.
Yeah, I know. I was just telling somebody, I said, it's been since March, which is crazy, which feels like forever ago, but also, feels like yesterday too, because I've been so busy. But, I've been looking forward to chatting again, and I'm just excited to be here. And a lot of things have happened over the last, 3 months. So it was good to kind of digest and chat about those things. So, looking forward and happy to have that title now that I'm finished and, followers, Dr. Police from now on, just got to stay.
So I will start with happy stuff and then go into more serious stuff and stuff we were talking about. So obviously happy stuff. We are happy to have our queen back. Obviously when this episode goes out, there'll probably be a more realization when you see featuring Dr. Kelsey Police. So this will be the first one that has that. So that's going to be really exciting. And like the promos for the podcast when this comes out saying fresh off getting her doctorate, we have to like all that. So that's super exciting. And obviously we already said super happy for you and know all the work that you've put into that and the sacrifices. So glad you were able to achieve that. On the serious note of what's been transpiring since March Madness, which we've talked about, it's kind of crazy because when I say March Madness, I don't even just mean like the D1 men's sports. I mean anyone who's playing basketball from D1, 2, 3, NCAA women. It's kind of a good point that you brought that the NCCA generalizes it to D1 men. I just obviously the same stuff. We just got to do better. We got to stop getting off the social media high horses. I know that's the right thing to do right now, but we got to get past that. We got to do more work if it's writing to Mark and it goes through his publicist, like phone calls. You almost got to think of it like your elected politician. Like you got to send them that you're displeased. And I know social media is the right way, not the right way, but the most popular right now. But there's got to be more ways. We can't just go on Twitter and bet for maybe a week span about, oh, the women's locker room was terrible. This is bad, blah, blah, blah. But then after it changes, everything's fixed. That's not the problem. The problem is it should never have been like that in the first place. So when they were in their oversight committee meetings, they thought this was going to be okay and no one was going to have an issue with it. We need to change the mindset of the leaders at the top. I don't know what type of training they get, but they need to get some cultural gender training and obviously some equality training because it ain't cutting it right now. And Mark Emmert, the president of the NCCA, I mean, you're the head guy. You have the power to change all this stuff. And I know you have to listen to the universities, and the universities have the power to tell you to change all this stuff. So wherever you're at, contact your local university, ask them what their Title IX thing is and see what they're doing to help the university and stay at home. But that is really all I have to say. So once again, thank you everyone for listening to L7C podcast. Thank you, Dr. Chelsea Police, for being on. And since she has her doctorate, she's not going to hopefully have like 3 months hiatus. Hopefully it can be a little bit more, maybe once a month. And I know you guys love listening to her episodes. So we'll try and get a little bit more consistent with those. I mean, the world has given us women topics every day. And if you don't hear them from ESPN or Fox or CBS or TNT, you will definitely hear them here. And with that being said, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. You guys take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.